Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us today on this very special invitation-only event, one of a series of events, of course, we hold here at the Institute. I know you all need reminders, but I do want to remind you that we do have a small party coming up in a couple of weeks, and if you haven't registered for our global conference, registration does close officially tomorrow. And if you have not looked at the website, I urge you to do that because we have a truly outstanding lineup of panelists this year. It is the best we have ever had. I'm convinced of that, and it'll be a great event as we explore finding solutions, not just talking about problems, but finding solutions to everything that the world faces. Now today, we are going to be focusing on someone who has done that with his life, who has found solutions and has made a major contribution to his own country and to the world. And to introduce him, it's my pleasure to introduce somebody whose life has been spent trying to find solutions, including trying to figure out how we can squeeze more chairs in here now, which is what he's doing. So let me introduce our chairman, Mike Milken.
Thank you, Mike, and it's great to be with you and welcome you today. I know many of you represent different countries around the world that have joined us today, and it's especially a joyous occasion for me today because we have a chance to see an individual that in his lifetime has changed the world, changed the country, changed the world, and we talk about at the Institute over a long period of time of how one person can make a difference. You know, in Los Angeles, many people think that Kobe Bryant has made a difference for the Los Angeles Lakers. But it's one thing to make a difference for a basketball team, and it's another thing to make a difference for a country. And I think we sometimes forget the importance of the relationship between Mexico and the United States. A number of years ago, when I was graduating high school, the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, said, "Geography has made us neighbors, tradition has made us friends, economics has made us partners, and necessity has made us allies." And this partnership was furthered during the presidency of Vicente Fox. There is no great future for your children, my children in the United States, unless there's also a great future for the children of Mexico. I'm going to read you the top surnames who buy homes in Los Angeles County. They used to be Smith and Jones. Number 1 is Garcia, Hernandez, Lopez, Rodriguez, Martinez, Gonzalez. Those are 6 of the top surnames. In the year 2000, more than 50% of the children born in the state of California came from parents or grandparents who were born in Latin America. And so the culture between Mexico and the United States, but particularly California, is much closer than people recognize. We've often talked about the importance of not only Mexico to the United States, but of United States to Mexico. The states of the United States, when combined with Mexico today, would make the second largest economy in the world. And so we need to focus on what the future is. As a population, the entire population of Western Europe in 1970, including Russia, was around 400 million. In Mexico was around 50 million. Today, the entire population of Western Europe is around 445 million. It increased by less than 50 million over the last almost 40 years. The population of Mexico today, 105 million, increasing by 55 million. Mexico's population, after the migration to the United States, has grown more than all of Western Europe in the last 40 years, even though at the time it only made up 1/8. Those of us who have focused on investing all wish we had moved 100% of our assets to Mexico. When Vicente Fox became president and left, the stock market in Mexico had increased 2.5-fold in U.S. dollars and 3.5-fold in pesos. In the United States, it's unchanged. So whether it's the economy or whether it's growth, we look for Mexico for being more than a partner, as President Kennedy said. It is rare that we can find an individual who takes a path that the President Vicente Fox takes. He was elected to the presidency in March of 2000. He broke a stranglehold that the ruling Institutional Revolutionary Party had held on the state for 70 years. So in our country, we have a book by our current president called The Audacity of Hope. We have a book by the President of Mexico called By the Revolution of Hope. And that revolution started in Mexico for 100 million people and for at least the same number in the United States. We all recognize in Los Angeles that if we go to a soccer match of the United States versus Mexico here in Los Angeles, that 90% of the people are rooting for Mexico. And so we feel that at home and rooting for President Fox. Inflation, a curse that all of Latin America suffered from, was brought under control, going from 11% to 4% under Vicente Fox's leadership. Going to college in Mexico and studying courses from Harvard University Business School, he followed a road that I don't believe many of you are aware of. Starting as a truck driver for Coca-Cola to rising to the presidency of Coca-Cola, turning out an opportunity at Coca-Cola to be in charge of Coca-Cola for all Latin America, to return to his home state and his family company, and then rising to the presidency of his country, from a truck driver to the president of one of the largest companies in the world, representative in Mexico, to the president of a country. Now, many of you might think that's unique, but as you know, the Milken Institute is constantly on search for new facts. Governor Davis would be disappointed, and I want you to know that there are 18 people that have worked for Coca-Cola who've become the president of their country. 18 people, mainly in Africa. But if you want to think about your career path, since leaving the presidency, President Fox has been involved in public speaking and the construction of the Vicente Fox Center, Mexico's first presidential library. One of the reasons we've had so few presidential libraries in Mexico is most presidents have not left at the zenith of their popularity. Not so for President Fox. He is a rock star wherever he goes, whether it's here in Southern California, at the University of Southern California or UC Irvine, or whether it's in his own country today. At 6'5", no, he didn't play basketball, but he is a rancher renowned, and he is a leader to his people. And for the United States of America, there is no better gift that Mexico can give us than a prosperous, successful Mexico, a well-educated citizenry. It is the number 2 trading partner of the United States. It is the number 1 travel destination for Americans. And for so many years, being the president of Mexico, particularly in the first part of the 20th century, was one of the most dangerous jobs you could have. Life expectancy generally was measured in a couple years. But the world changed with the leadership of this man. And I bring you the president, former president of Mexico, Vicente Fox, Revolutionary Hope.
Muchísimas gracias. Muy buenas tardes, Governor Davis. How nice to see you again after the many meetings, fruitful meetings we had here in California. And thank you to the Mikes, to the two Migueles. They've been splendid. They've been extremely generous on presenting me. And thanks to Mike for the invitation to be here with you. I'm highly impressed of the talent, the personalities, the diversity represented here. And it's a great opportunity for us to have a dialogue. And that's why I will try not to speak too long so that we can hear about yourselves, hear about your questions, your suggestions, which I think is most important in a dialogue. About the population in Mexico, it's very interesting figures that we just heard. Let me tell you that Mexican population doubled 3 times through the 20th century, coming from 18 million to 36 or 40 million to 80 million, and then to 105. And yes, that is the net figure of Mexicans in Mexico. But the good news is that that will never happen again. Never the population of Mexico will double, according to the projections and according to the population pyramid. As a matter of fact, we're going to get as far as 135 million Mexicans, and that's it. So in that situation also, not only we will not double again, but we will start decreasing the amount of our population as of 2035. But still, I think we're going to be seeing the Garcias, the Hernandez, the Martinez, and the so many Mexicans growing here in the States, but growing not horizontally, but vertically. I am extremely proud of each and every single one Mexican here in this nation. Either they are documented or undocumented, they work with loyalty in this nation. They contribute enormously to the growth of this economy, to make it more productive and successful. As many have said, today is difficult to understand a United States without the enrichedness of this people present here, because migrants have a very special status. They're very, very special persons. And this is what I see in this room. I guess most everybody here, looking backwards, has a migrant heritage. This nation was built, has grown to become the leader in the world, the largest economy, through migration. And maybe that's why, at least myself, I don't understand this idea of building a wall. We should be building bridges instead of walls. And we all know that walls don't work. And isolating yourself doesn't work. We can understand September the 11th, that very sad day that should never, never repeat again. And through that and afterwards, most of us who come from abroad, we feel fear in this society. And fear is not a good advisor on the decision that this great leading nation has to take to the future, on the way this great leading nation is going to face the challenge of this mammoth financial crisis that started here. So this nation needs maybe to come back to basics, to the dream of the founding fathers of this nation. The dream of democracy, freedom, equal opportunities to everybody, which is the dream of the Americans, because we all are Americans, wherever we are in this continent. And we all share the same dream. The dream that brought my grandfather from Cincinnati, Ohio, without a penny in his pocket, as a migrant, down to Mexico. And he settled in the state of Guanajuato back in 1895. And he found and built his American dream right there. As those many migrants that come to this nation looking for their American dream, looking for something better to their families. That's why migrants are such a special characters, leaders, and people. There was success in different fronts. In my administration, it was mentioned here the 350% advance in the stock exchange in Mexico, which reflects the success, the trust, the confidence on the economy. And it's a good indicator and a good benchmark to determine what is going on. And in these times of crisis, many people speak about the strategy of counter cycles, so that you expand the budget and government investment in trying to get the economy back on its feet and grow again. And this counter-cycle strategies can be only followed with success if you did build up your strength and your reserves to be able to meet the difficult times. And Mexico, in the last years, doubled its reserves. We went up as high as $85 billion of reserves, double than what we had just 8 years ago. And we reduced debt to half of what it was. And today we have a ratio of 2-to-1 between reserves, 2 and 1 of debt. That's a very strong and healthy situation that hopefully this nation will attain one day. We prepaid debt commitments 4 years in advance. 07, 08, 09, and 010. There's no debt commitments to meet by the Mexican economy. That is giving us the space we need to implement strategies in trying to cope with the crisis and in trying to come out of the crisis in a shorter period of time. But there was one subject where I cannot claim that we had success. And this maybe was the cornerstone of the commitment that both starting administrations, President Bush administration and President Fox administration, back on year 2001, when we were just starting, we had the summit meeting at Rancho San Cristobal, where you all have your home. And my mother was so proud to receive in that small community, only 2,500 inhabitants, that ranch, that ejido of poor people, where the family has been there for 5 generations since my grandfather came. My mother was so proud that the president of the most powerful nation in the world came and gave her a kiss. And we were full of hope and full of joy to welcome the President of the United States, hold that summit meeting, and come with a resolution, a firm commitment that we will work in our administrations to come with a immigration reform, an integral immigration reform. That was the commitment. We shook hands. We didn't ride the horses because the windshield cowboy didn't know how to ride horses. But he wore his cowboy boots. So we shook hands, we risked our camisas, and we got to work. And we were doing quite well because the U.S. economy was doing well. And this economy needed, by growing 2.5%, 500,000 new workers to sustain the expansion of the economy. And this economy needed 500 additional workers to be able to meet the challenge of the pension plans and the retirement plans of an elderly population here in the United States. And this economy has been challenged by Asia and China. And it's been pretty difficult to meet that challenge unless we get together, Canada, United States, and Mexico, and work for productivity, work to improve our competitiveness, and work to defend our markets, to save our jobs, and to build further by exporting. So that was what we committed. And then 4 days before September the 11th, that very sad day and date that should never, ever repeat again, 4 days in advance, I was in Washington to address joint houses of Congress. Full auditorium. Everybody with great expectancies. I spent 2 days before on talking to the different committees, Congress committees related to the relationship between United States and Mexico, related to immigration. And we had spent months and years building up a proposal on the immigration issue that would be a win-win situation to both of our nations. I had the honor of receiving Senator McCain, Senator Kennedy. We spent a lot of time in Mexico on building the proposal that today is in Congress. Still in Congress. It's been frozen. It's not been attended. And it's been a long time since it was presented to Congress. And there was excitement, optimism, 4 days before September the 11th. And then the shock came, and things changed dramatically. Priorities were totally changed. There was only one priority for a long period of time: the fight against terrorism, convoked by President Bush, applauded everywhere in the world, applauded, standing applauses in every single meeting of heads of the states or leaders where I participated and he participated. Big round of applauses, 5 minutes in Congress on every word he would mention. For 18 months, he was applauded everywhere. And then people started forgetting about him, criticizing, and getting away from him. He's my friend. I respect him a lot. We had that big difference in the case of Iraq, where he wanted me to join this great nation in coming into Iraq and taking care of the dictator of Saddam Hussein. And I would have the advice of the other group of leaders of different nations, like Schroeder, Chancellor Schroeder in Germany, or President Putin in Russia, or Chirac in France, and so many others. President Lagos from Chile. We both were in the Security Council, Chile and Mexico. And we decided to defend the multilateral strategy, because we all together created the United Nations. Mexico was founder of the United Nations, and we created that global institution for taking care of problems and conflicts wherever they appear in the world. Their charter is to bring harmony, democratic negotiations, dialogue among nations. So the more we are obliged to work with the United Nations, the more we are obliged to strengthen, reform, and have a renewed and reinvented United Nations. But that has not happened yet, but still we have to have faith on that global institutions that we, all nations, created. So that was the big difference we had, and we decided in Mexico that we would not go along with that position. And this is the way the relationship between United States and Mexico has gone all along. Times, long times of harmony and working together, and then conflicts. And it's natural on a shared border of 2,500 kilometers, on a border that is the busiest one in the world. Over 1 million people cross there every day. Thousands, tens of thousands of containers cross that border every day. It's huge what we have accomplished through NAFTA. It's a trade balance of over 500 billion US dollars. It's a trade balance that is larger than all what is done by all Latin American countries together. Mexico buys from United States more products and services than what Italy, France, Germany, and Britain do together. So we are partners. We work together. Mexico is a huge customer for U.S. products and services. Mexico is accountable for millions of jobs for U.S. citizens in this nation through our imports from United States. And the vision, the NAFTA vision, has to be carried further. We've been successful just trading, but we can do much more. We have a great potential working together, the three nations, and then extend that even to a continental agreement, an ALCA for this continent. The challenge has to be met working united and working by blocks. This is the way the world is structuring itself. There is not one single relevant and only nation or region that has all the resources, that has all the power, that has all the technology, that has all the financing and the economic resources needed for growth. It's not that we are seeing the decline of the leader, United States. We're seeing the rise of others. But we are seeing the spirit of this nation abandoning its leadership, little bit isolating itself. So there is a needed renewal on this nation to work together with the whole world. We have to keep on working on NAFTA. We have to keep on moving on that next step and next phase together, associated as neighbors, as friends, and as partners. And we can do that. In the meantime, Mexico is not only facing the problem of this economic crisis, which, by the way, we Latin Americans are much better prepared and experienced in meeting crisis. We had crisis every other year. The tequila crisis, the samba crisis, the sugar crisis, you name it, and we lived through them. The one back in 1994, December, in one night, we all Mexicans lost at least half of our patrimony, the poor and the rich, through that mammoth devaluation and the impact of that crisis. And we came out with a sort of bailout, like it is being done here, with the support and the help of United States in that loan that we got of 50 billion US dollars, which President Clinton brought to Mexico, and another 150 billion that we had to put together to meet the problem. If you compare in relative terms and amounts, the bailout, the FOBAPROA in Mexico was much larger than the one that is being implemented today here in the United States, much larger than the 50,000 or 50 billion US dollars. And we met the crisis and we paid back in 1 year. those 50 billion. And an interesting solution came about, which is keeping that debt and those commitments out of the accounting or the budget or the foreign debt. It's still floating there somewhere in a cloud. That debt, which is real, that Mexico has. On the meantime, money has flowed in through collecting accounts receivable, through selling assets, or money has been flowing out by paying interest of that debt, but it's not included yet on our financial statements as a nation. I think that we gained 10 years' time with that, and now Mexico will be more ready to meet that debt. Me personally, I'm a rancher. I'm not an economist. I am a business person. I'm not a politician at all. But the judgment I have on this so-called counter-cycle policies of expanding the expense, expanding the budget to try to impulse the economy is not the right solution unless you had built the resources you need for slow periods of growth of the economy. I have my doubts about the solutions that this nation is bringing to meet the crisis. Because at the very end, indebting more the nation, bringing the nation to more deficits, someday somebody will have to pay for that. Maybe with inflation, maybe with high interest rates. And the problem here, which I think is a moral problem, is not only United States that will have the problem in the future, it's the rest of the world. Because we see today that whatever happens in one place immediately extends to the rest. So it's pretty difficult to say what is the best solution for this problem. I end up with this comparison. We had a big feast. We had a big banquet this last 10 years. Never the world had expanded so much. Never people had consumed so much in Africa, in Asia, in China, in Mexico. Never before we had the opportunity to buy the cellular telephones, the computers, the cars, the homes, to expand our manufacturing capabilities. The race of an economy like China's economy in such a short period of time is because there were financing to everybody. I think it was of geniuses to multiply $1 sustained with assets for debt to make it $40. But we all enjoyed those $40. We all ate as much as we could. And of course, we had indigestion. I mean, we ate too much. And some say, doesn't matter, let's get more credit and let's eat more so that we keep consumption going. Well, I better think like housewives think for their family. In difficult times, they're very prudent, they're very visionary, they want to protect their kids. They say, no, let's stop. Let's not go to the theater, or let's not take such a long vacations, or no, instead of going to Europe, which is so expensive today, let's go to Mexico and, and spend a little bit more. Excuse me, spend a little bit less. And I think it's time for prudence. I think it's time for saving. I think it's time for finishing our digestion and get ready for the next banquet, which at the very end will come. economic cycles have shown us that better times will come. And that should be, according to my thinking, the strategy right now. Finally, a word about Centro Fox, and I asked permission to Michael for my promotion. We finished building the library, the first ever presidential library outside of the United States. And it's, of course, inspired. Yeah. And it's, of course, inspired on presidential libraries in the States, but on this new strategy that, for instance, President Clinton is following. Not only the library, which is in a way a passive instrument of the museum and deposit of the documents of the administration into a very dynamic Clinton global initiative to attend today's world, to work with today's world in solving VIH, SIDA, or the weather problem and warming, or else. Or we learn from President Carter the same, that he's got the Carter Library where you see the dresses of Rosalind, although I'm turned off now, too old, but they're still there. He moved to the Carter Center, and he has the purpose of ending up with trachoma, for instance, this sickness where you get blind, the so-called water river disease, and he's about to accomplish that objective. Or observing elections in countries that still have problems on the transparency of the election. Or defending human rights all over the world, even if it's Cuba or it's somewhere else. So we have that combination, and Centro Fox is a think tank, it's an academic center, it's a cultural center, and it's also a library and an information center. So we've got rid of the idea of a museum. And we work on 4 issues. Number 1, democracy and freedom. Number 2, market economy with responsibility. Number 3, to develop powerful social policies on education, health, poverty, and housing to go with a strong economy generating wealth. And finally, gender equity, which is Martha's passion, which I share with her. So it's 4 issues that we work, as I said, on academic programs, on think tank activities, on library and information, etc. But at the very end, what Centro Fox thinks and believes is that we are all leaders, that every kid, every person in this world, we are born leaders. So in an institution, you don't generate or create leaders. What you can do at the very best is facilitate the process of knowing yourself, the process of knowing where you want to go, what you want to do, and then discover your leadership. And once you discover it, then put it to practice, commit in that leadership. Leadership in the family, in the workplace, in agriculture, leadership in politics, in religion, or whatever activity we human beings have. So we want to facilitate, assist everybody that gets in touch with Centro Fox to discover and commit its leadership. And then seed that leadership in politics, business, and society all through Latin America. Because we need a successful Latin America on this 21st century. We were the losers in the 20th century in hands of dictators, military dictators, personal dictators, authoritarian governments, corruption, everywhere in Latin America. This is our term. This is our century. Goldman Sachs stated that by 2040, the U.S. economy will go down to second place, and Chinese economy will be the largest in the world, the leading economy in the world. That Japan drops from the second place to fourth, India comes in third, and Mexico comes in five. But that's not a gift. That's something we Mexicans have to win for ourselves. And that's something we can do and accomplish if we kept associated with, through NAFTA, with the United States and Canada. And then we will meet that forecast of Goldman Sachs. Well, I don't want to tire you anymore. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
So we're going to take questions for a few minutes, but before we do, just three brief points. One, a very important partner that I did not introduce before but would like to introduce now is Donna Marta Fox. So as we know, there's always a man up front for a very talented woman. That's what my wife always reminds me. Second, I just want to reiterate the importance of NAFTA to our country, the United States, and of the relationships between Canada and Mexico that President Fox has referred to today. And third, I want to just reiterate that most of you, if you hire a senior executive, you ask someone to come work or lead your government, you'd like to know that individuals had experience before. You'd like them not to make their first mistake when they began working on a major project for you, rather make small mistakes. And it was almost 20 years ago, not too far from here, that we held a forum with business leaders from Latin America, particularly Mexico, and business leaders from the United States. And many of the people in the United States all thought that they were superior in business and leadership, etc. And it only took 2 days of interaction for them to realize the talent of the leadership in Latin America. And as President Fox referred to, having to deal with the devaluations, wiping out half the value of your currency, having to deal with other issues that you, these crises that President Fox talked about, prepared them. Their challenges as leaders in government and business were far greater than we had here in the United States. And within 48 hours, the bond was very close, and the respect for the leaders from Latin America, particularly in leading in business sectors, changed overnight with recognizing it. And I just want to underline what President Fox said. If you've never lived through a crisis, you don't know how you're going to react in that crisis, how you're going to adjust to the crisis, okay, and the challenges that Latin America has had to face. One point that President Fox did make is there's change that we see in Latin America, a great deal of change in leadership, and life always doesn't move forward. Sometimes it goes forward and it comes back. And we just can't underline the importance of Mexico and Brazil in their leadership, along with Chile, to the future of all Latin America and the United States. And so I'd like to open up to questions for a few minutes, and then the President will sign some books. Governor Davis, would you like to start us out?
Thank you, Michael. Mr. President, thank you for accepting my invitation to speak to a joint session of the California Legislature. It was my honor to be at your inauguration in late 2000. If you had to give advice to this country, beyond your earlier remarks, as to how we should cope with this environmental challenge, and you're right, part of it is our responsibility in terms of its origin, that would work out best not only for America but the rest of the world, what advice would that be?
Well, my mother told me never give advice to nobody because they will hold you responsible for that. No, I think that, yes, we need a renewed leadership of this great nation. We missed the leader in many parts of the world, but not a leader imposing, not a leader using military power. We need a leader with compassion. We need a leader that listens, that we can have a dialogue with and build solutions to the problems of the world. A leader that respects the global institutions. I think that would be about the best. It worries me, the comments raised by President Obama in relation to NAFTA, to open it back for discussion when it's been so successful. I would open it up back to enrich it and to include a new vision to go further. And to me, always the case of the European Union has been an inspiration. We don't have to copy that, but leaders like France, like Germany, like Britain had the humbleness of dialogue, association, constructing together with the small nations, the ones lagging behind. And look at the difference of today's Spain with 25 years ago Spain, or today's Ireland, or Greece, or Portugal compared to. And I am certain that that's the future that expects for the East European nations that have joined in, the Turkish, the Polands, the Czechs, the Slovenians. They will come along, and it's because this spirit of solidarity is so strong there. And maybe this spirit of convenience and security, because what would be best for this nation than having a prosperous neighbor to the south? I mean, that would be the best that could happen to all of us. So that line of action is the one that we should try to build to meet all the challenges that we have.
Next question.
President Fox, in the last month, to be specific, on March 16th, my wife and I attended a Stanford Hoover Institute meeting, and then on April 3rd, there was a conversation with Condoleezza Rice about Mexico. In the Hoover Institute meeting on in March, the 16th of March, one of the professors was asked, what are the really very troubled areas of the world? And it was very interesting what his comment was. It wasn't Iran, it wasn't Iraq, it wasn't North Korea, it was Mexico. Condoleezza Rice, in being interviewed by a newspaper recently, said the one challenge that I would pay a lot of attention to is Mexico. I think what's happening on our border with the cartels that we are being fed through Central America. In fact, there were 5,000 assassinations in Mexico last year by the cartels. This is starting to take on Colombia-like proportions. The thing that, and she also goes on to say that she thinks that the Calderon government is a very, very supportive of the United States and trying to do something about this. My question is, these cartels appear to be so prolific and so strong in your country. What is going to have to happen in order to get these under control so that Mexico becomes a wonderful place like like a lot of us want to visit But now a lot of us are concerned because of the fact that you go down there and you're concerned about just what the situation is.
Yeah. Well, that one thing that could happen is reduce consumption in the States, drug consumption, and things will improve in Mexico. Reduce free distribution and sale of arms, especially those that correspond to the military. But it's a joint responsibility. It's not blaming each other that we're going to correct this. Mexico just happens to be in between the drug-producing nations of the South and the large consumer market on the North. And we started being just a transit nation. Then Mexicans learned to produce drugs instead of bringing them from Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia. And very unfortunately, the more successful we are in refraining drugs to cross the border, the more distribution, promotion, and discount and prices of that drug is done within Mexico. And very unfortunately, today we are a drug-consuming nation. And this is what basically changed the whole picture. Because now Mexican cartels are fighting to control markets within Mexico. Now the second level of the organizations of the cartels whose capo mayor has been jailed or has been brought to meet U.S. justice, they are trying to get that position, so they fight among them. And yet there's a lot of killings. There's a war right now. This is the path that Presidente Calderón, with his strong character, has selected to bring in the army and go all the way, confront the cartels. And that's why we have what we have today. It's very important that we advance. It's very important that we reach a solution. There is a lesson that I learned with two presidents that have taken the same strong, firm attitude, very strong use of power, in a way like Machiavelli says. You gain respect by imposing fear. The other alternative comes from my hero, San Ignacio de Loyola, the saint. He says, you gain respect by love, meaning dialogue, meaning respect, and meaning looking for solutions in a different way. President Bush, President Uribe chose this strategy. You remember we heard President Bush saying, I will get the snakes out of the holes, and I will listen with my boots. And President Uribe saying, I will finish with the guerrilla, and I will finish with the cartels. And today, a few years later, same strategy has given two results. One of them presidents that comes out of the administration with a rate approval of, at the very best, 25%. And President Uribe with 80% approval. The lesson I get from this is, if you go into a war, you have to do planning, you have to evaluate your resources, you have to evaluate your enemy, and you better win that war soon enough, or it will revert to you. And that's what happened. President Uribe was also very lucky on the Tiro Fijo, the leader of the guerrilla, getting cancer and dying. So he had the help of God and good luck, which you need to meet every challenge this world. That's maybe the dilemma for Mexico and Presidente Calderón to advance soon enough in defeating the cartels, in doblegar the cartels, because right now it's force to force. I am absolutely convinced that Mexico, its government, and its people will win this war, no doubt. The problem is how long and how big are the costs associated to doing this job. But anyway, we're on this path, and we just have to carry it all the way. And I have much trust and confidence on the leadership of Calderón. So things will happen. Now, in the States, the Ludovs are of no help to nobody. I mean, the way he behaves, the way he uses media to criticize, to discriminate, to attack Mexicans in the United States. And his position on this doesn't help at all. Even CNN is putting this on such a high spot. And those who are now recommending don't go to Mexico. Those are the associated costs that we are paying. Let me tell you, if you should or should not go to Mexico. Please go to Mexico and please come to Central Fox. Because the chances of you being in one of these shootings, which is 1 or 2 a day, same as you have here, schools and hospitals and people that go crazy and take the shotgun and they kill others. The chances of being there are less than driving with Rodney Scully, which is here driving for us in his car in 101 here in California, or your chances of a plane crash. So, I mean, we live there, we're there, and we will stay there. Well, we have security. But we have to separate. Regular rates of crime are not higher than they've been. And we have this fight, which is, yes, bringing in this additional pressure on violence. But to me, once you choose an alternative, you have to stay with it. Otherwise, who knows when we are going to finish. It's not the only alternative. Huh? There are other alternatives. There are other ways and means of overcoming this. Even this debate in the States today about freeing or making legal marijuana consumption. Today we're thinking different than we were time ago. And we see the experience of Chicago and the prohibition and the 30s of last century. Violence came because of the prohibition. Once the prohibition ended, violence, I don't say that it ended, but it moved to another sectors of field of actions, like Vegas or somewhere else. But it's a consideration, and it's a debate that is going on in Mexico, whether that will help for a solution. Never can be implemented if it's not the two countries. So we have to think a lot, work a lot, and maybe wait a lot for that kind of solutions.
Just before we have our last question so the President can sign some books, all I can say is, as I've looked at my own experience in Mexico for 40 years, every time we think there's fear, that means there's an opportunity. And as President Fox has pointed out, whether it's in any major American city downtown, questionable whether you're safer there or safer in Mexico. We don't publish our statistics the same, but we have as many terrorists being trained in Los Angeles as any country in the world. As they drop out of our school systems and can't continue, we have the most number of gangs, more gang members and more gang members than members of the police here in Los Angeles. So we can't just look at others without looking at ourselves. my own view is that Mexico is so important to the United States. But the fact that you confront your problems, as the President said, is the first beginning of that solution. In my own personal view, the problems of Pakistan are far greater than the problems of Mexico because we don't even know if they can confront their problems. One last question. Yes, sir.
First of all, I want to thank you for acknowledging how leaders need the help to unleash their leadership and how many there are in the world that need that kind of help. I'm launching an institute called the Unleashing Genius Institute that specializes in helping young leaders around the world do the same. And, you know, there are three things for a great leader, and I'd like you to talk about one of them. One is to know, to find out what the answer, what the path is. Two is to be able to communicate in a compelling way so that people follow. And three, which I'd like you to comment on because I think you have a lot of experience with it, is the courage to act. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience of courage?
Well, briefly, I learned from the saint that you must have heroic aspirations, objectives, maybe unreachable objectives, but they move you to action. They in a way are like hooked in the sky, and you move to reach there, so you grow. The other one is President Nixon, which is in a way similar to this. When you read the Sixth Crisis, Nixon's book, he shows that we human beings have such an extraordinary capacity and potential that we never finish discovering all what we can do. And so he relates the crisis, and he says that we are dormant when we are on everyday activities. But when we see in front challenge and we see objectives, high objectives, then we get prepared to get into battle, to get into the arena, he says. Once you are on the arena, you become very strong, very capable, much more than what you can think directly. So all your adrenaline, all your brain, everything comes to attack the challenge. And then he says that when you are reaching and succeeding on that challenge, will come the worst part of our capacities, which is when you become complacent of yourself and you say, okay, I got it, I succeeded. And then you drop your defenses again, you drop your energy, and you don't keep. So his recommendation is before you end your activities in that arena and before you even meet your objective, you have to have your next objective. And then you keep moving and you keep your energy. I decided to become president long before anybody could identify that I was after that. And it was when I decided to change Article 82 of the Constitution, which for an individual, for a rancher, was a very heroic, big aspiration. And with the help of Krause and Octavio Paz and Carlos Fuentes, because they believed that article was discriminatory because my mother was not born in Mexico. She was born in Spain. So the Constitution would not let anybody with a foreign parent, either one, born outside. He could not become president. And that's where it all started. And then I became congressman, I said, let me resign. I don't like this being there, sitting where nothing is happening. No, because Congress was totally controlled by the PRI then and by the executive branch. There were no independent decisions in Congress. It was instructions given by the president. So it was useless, in a way, to be there. But anyway, I became governor and then president. Today, I am in the best of my happiness and my joy, doing what Martha and I are doing in Presidential Library. Again, please come. Tequila, enchiladas. A visit to the city of Guanajuato is waiting for you, and a visit to the center. We'll have a great time. On May the 15th, on May the 22nd, on May the 29th, we have 3 gala dinners. And we have all that you can imagine of the great state in Oaxaca, right there in Vicente Fox. The paintings of Maestro Toledo, of Maestro Tamayo, Maestro Orozco are going to be there. And there will be an auction. The paintings of the best of the best of the modern young artists of Oaxaca are going to be there. The Guelaguetza, this magnificent show of indigenous culture, dance, complete is going to be there. It's never been out of Oaxaca, complete, the Guelaguetza. And the sopranos, harp, the soprano down, the bandas from Oaxaca, the 3 best restaurants from Oaxaca are going to be serving there, great food. The artisans from Oaxaca will be there selling either clothing or their magnificent pieces of handicraft. So come, please.
Today you just saw a small glimpse of an individual who has changed not only Mexico, but the United States in many ways. And we are so thankful that your grandfather had the courage to immigrate to Mexico, and it has changed the history and the course of history forever of 2 great countries. Thank you very much. So we're going to have this